the lake level was still rising. Okay? Engineers said, well, we better open up that 40-foot spillway tunnel, the emergency tunnel. They opened that thing up, you know, initially, I don't know, 50% of capacity, the lake level was still rising. 75% capacity that the tunnel was rated for, the lake level was still rising. They couldn't get rid of the water fast enough. 100% capacity. I said, we gotta give it all we got, boys. They opened the gates to full, right? And lake level was still rising. What are we gonna do now? The engineers were in panic mode, and they didn't know whether to abandon, to tell people to evacuate Grand Canyon or what. They didn't know what to do. They said, well, we got no choice. We got to open up that tunnel to beyond what it's rated for, and let it flow beyond what it was engineered to handle, you know. And so I don't know whether whether it was 110 or 120% of what it was rated for, but it wasn't long after. Now here the reports differ how long, but whether it was a matter of minutes or seconds or perhaps a few hours, but it wasn't the full day. It was a short period of time that the engineers on the surface, they felt ground vibrations. Oh, that's not good. We're getting earthquakes. I wonder what's doing that. And a few minutes later, they noticed the plume of water that was, I mean, it was gushing out of this tube. I mean, out of this 40-foot tunnel here, it was making a big rooster tail column out, spraying water into the river. A nice, white, beautiful stream of water. Well, it started surging. The whole thing was breaking up. And then the water turned red, which happened to be the same color as the bedrock. Okay? And they noticed chunks of concrete and bedrock being hurled into the river. They shut the thing, they closed the gates, went in there to inspect it, and what did they see? They saw a tunnel. This is the tunnel here, the 40-foot tunnel, and there was a pit that got eroded, and they had to re-engineer. That's what they rebuilt the rebar here. But the tunnel, the pit was 32 feet deep, 42 feet wide, 150 feet long. That was eroded in a matter of, you know, at the most a couple of hours, maybe seconds, by the power of that moving water. So the water eroded through the concrete and into the bedrock and down into the bedrock 30 feet down in a short, not millions of years here, short period of time, right? Okay. And it tells you what water can do at high velocity. You get water going at a velocity of greater than 30 feet per second, and some mighty peculiar things start happening. One of them is called cavitation. Engineers know all about this. Most geologists never heard the word before, right? But cavitation is a process that really happens when you get water flow at high velocity and it's flowing over an uneven surface. If there's any kind of irregularities in that surface, it'll form a vacuum underneath there, right? And the vacuum is not an air bubble; it's a vacuum where it's nothing. There's nothing there. There's no air. There's nothing, right? Which is hard to imagine. And sometimes you get vacuum bubbles that get entrained in the stream because it's going fast, and vacuum bubbles break off and go downstream. And when those little vacuum bubbles, little tiny things, collide with the wall further down as it goes down the current, and a vacuum bubble implodes against the wall, it's like a mini super jackhammer that can pound that rock and literally turn any rock, any concrete to powder, pulverize it in a short order. This is called cavitation.
Steel too.
Oh yeah.
It's a pressure washer.
Steel, easily steel. No, it's much more severe than the pressure washer. Yeah. Yeah.
But that hurt, I mean.
I've heard it said that your dentist, when he drills on your teeth, because that enamel's tough stuff, right? I think he raises the stream of water to high velocity. No, seriously, and it cavitates, yeah. Which is kind of funny because he's drilling cabbage.
He's making cavities.
Yeah, he's making cabbage. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So cavitation is a process you've got to take seriously. You got water moving at high velocity, you're going to get this process. Do you think this would be significant during the flood?
Right.
When you've got, think about this, continents are no longer in the way to interrupt global currents of seawater. You're going to have to move the seawater before you even start talking about other dynamics that could have been going on. Anyway, interesting, huh?
The recent rains, we have a creek in our backyard.
Yeah.
Has been dry for about 10 or 15 years, and it in the past, it's been 200 feet wide.
Yeah.
And all that back, it's a wash, it's a creek, and the holes that are dug and
Yeah, there was a hole.
oh my goodness.
There was a hole that was
Yeah.
dug after these last rains we had.
Yeah.
It's about 3 feet deep and 2 feet wide. It wasn't there before, in
Yeah.
the sand, in the sediment.
Yeah.
So,
Everybody knows floods produce mud and floods produce erosion. And you talk to survivors of a flood, and they always tell you the same kind of thing. They say, we didn't think a flood like that could do that much damage. They always say that. Yeah.
Yes, again.
Oh, and that's so that's when they opened up the turbines at full bore, right? So those are the smaller outlet tubes there. Eventually they opened up all 4 of them. And then I couldn't find a good picture, but that's the 40-foot spillway tunnel jetting its water out there. I couldn't find a good picture, so I said it was that. So you get the idea. Oh, and what did they do to solve this? They closed the gate, they went in there, and then it was a race against time. 24 hours a day they went. They got every cement truck in the world they could get out to that area to pump concrete in that hole as fast as they could do it, because that lake level was still rising. And it turns out that by the grace of God, that water just began to slowly rise at a slower rate, and they actually put plywood boards on the top of the dam to hold the whole lake back for a while. Anyway, it's kind of funny what they did. And then they were able to open up the thing again and let the water flow. And they engineered it so that it would be able to handle cavitation better. They used a technique. They put little drills in
slots and things.
Little slots in the concrete. Yeah. Okay. So that's the pit there that was carved. Yeah. Yeah.
That was ugly.
Yeah. So it helps to underline for you what water does at high speed, doesn't it? Water is a powerful agent. Makes me tremble just a little bit when I think about God sending judgment on this world in the form of a global flood. I don't know about you. Right? And then finally we got a linguistic record of a global flood. And this is the last one we'll do. And the Wallapai Indians are a tribe that have a big, big reservation in western Grand Canyon. It's a big piece of property. It's beautiful out there. Wilderness, most of it. And because I was involved in some of this research, I had to get permission to go out there I talked to the whole tribal council and everything about getting permission to extract a fossil, because they had some of the best nautilites out there. Anyway, so I dealt with some of the leaders, and one of them was this lady named Lucille Wadahamaji. And who was she? She wrote a book on Wallapai literature, and she was a scholar. She was a PhD, right? Happened to be Wallapai tribe, still there. Old lady living on the reservation, and and there was a flood legend in her book, and the flood legend was about a global flood. I was very interested in that, and I got to interview her, and I talked to her about that. And let me give you the story first. This is a pictograph that's found in a mountain on their property called Spirit Mountain. It's sacred to them for this reason. It's sacred to them because here is the flood story. It focuses on that. And the white man didn't have any interpretation as petroglyph until Lucille Wadahamaji wrote it down in English language in this document, in this book. And anyway, and she took some heat from the tribal council for this, because prior to this, the only way that this story was passed down was by oral tradition, and also by song and dance. They do celebrations with this, and they would communicate the flood story that way. But this is what it is, all right? This is it here, and I'm going to give you Lucille Wadahamaji's interpretations, and she got it from her grandfather, And her grandfather, according to her, got it from her grandfather by oral tradition. Right? Anyway, it rained on the earth for 45 days. That's what that symbol means there. That one means the water was rising. Okay, waters were rising. And there's some more of that water. And the little lollipops are people. All the people were wiped out. Right? And in other words, it was a global flood.
Yeah.
And only this one mountain was left sticking up, and there was an old man on the mountain. Okay? And then what? Many days passed. That's what the sun means there. Many days passed. And then there was a bird that had special instructions from the Creator himself. Right? From the Creator. Beyond all the Indian gods, the Creator of all of it, you know. And he came with instructions to deliver to that old man. And the instructions were this: take a ram's horn. Oh, the bird came from the east. Take a ram's horn and dig at the base of Spirit Mountain so the waters will drain off the earth. Well, the man followed those instructions. He obeys. The waters began to descend. And the man tells the bird to go after this, and the bird comes back a second time, this time with grass in its mouth, to inform the man that the waters are now receding. Right? And so here I'm talking to this lady. I want to interview her about the flood legend. So I got to talk to her. And because I was dealing with her a little bit, you know, quite a bit, you know, these Indians I've discovered, they really appreciate when you talk frankly to them. Don't beat around the bush when you want to talk to one of these guys. Tell them what you mean. Right? Anyway, so I asked her, I said, you've no doubt noticed the similarity between this account and the biblical account, haven't you? She's a scholar. Oh, certainly, yeah. And she could see the wheels were turning in my head. And my next question was, well, what do you suppose the odds are that the Wallapai account was, I didn't use this word, but was corrupted because of white man's influences? Because certainly there's been some missionary influence on the Wallapai reservation. And she paused for a minute, and she gave me a very calm answer, and the way she answered told me a lot, because I wanted to hear how she responded to that. She could have been offended, right? You ask something like that. And she said, well, there's no chance of that at all. Number one, I got it from my grandfather. I know I did. And there weren't that much influence of missionaries. And furthermore, we hate the white man's religion. There's no way we want to corrupt our story with that and pollute it with the white man's religion. And so it was kind of cool the way she answered me. In other words, it really looks like it was a genuine oral tradition that was passed down. It's as if people, and this is not unique to the Wallapai.
No, it sure isn't.
The Native American Indians, almost all of them have a flood legend. Why? Why a flood legend of all things? And ancient people or indigenous peoples from around the world.
Yeah, the Hawaiians have one too.
Very frequently.
Chinese.
There's hundreds of these around the world. Why a flood legend?
Every culture.
It's as if peoples from around the world have a distant memory of an event that really happened.
The Aborigines too.
And it's been embellished in different ways over the years, but could it be they're pointing to the same story? It's fascinating. It's just a great story in anthropology to think about.
Did you ask her about how would you explain that they have the same story? I mean, basically it's kind of like the same story,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I talked to her a little bit about that, and she kind of shrugged her shoulders. And you know what I found particularly with scholars and people like this who are Indians, when you begin asking them specific questions about their flood legend or about their creation account or something like that, they kind of get a little bit embarrassed. I've sensed that because they really don't believe it either. Really.
In other words, they believe neither. Sorry, they put both stories into the myth category. Is that
Yeah,
what you're saying?
exactly.
Oh.
It's kind of like, well, this is what our forefathers taught us, and this is the story. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not.
It's our culture,
It's
it's
our
fun,
culture. Yeah,
like
we don't.
Santa Claus.
Yeah, and I'm kind of peculiar because I'm trying to think. Well, I'm thinking in terms this was historical, right? And then I told her, I said, Lucille, you know, we're doing research on your property about a global flood, right? We're doing knowledge research, we want, you know, that's what I'm out here for, you know. And she says, tell me more about this. And I told her about these knowledge, you know, and she says, I want to see these things. And we took her out, it's a long remote drive all the way out, and this was Steve Austin came out, and she joined us with another one of their trips we did out to Jeff Canyon, this remote little canyon, side canyon, and went out there, and she saw it. She saw the knowledge, and we explained it all to her, and she kind of nodded silently, didn't have a lot to say.
That's great.
I talked to her a little bit about Christ, but she wasn't really, didn't seem, it seemed like I was getting pushed back a little bit, and I stopped. Anyway, and just as a funny coincidence, she said as we were leaving there, she said, it's funny that you found these things best in this little draw here called Jeff Canyon. I said, why's that? She says, as a little girl, I grew up in this remote stretch, this remote little area right here. This is where I was. So it really meant something to her. So who knows how it stuck with her. It was kind of funny how all that happened.
What is that lady's name? What is her name?
Lucille Watahamaji. Yeah. And the book, yeah, it's actually spelled just the way it sounds. I can give it to you later if you want. But the book is called Spirit Mountain, is the name of the book.
Oh.
Is this picture in that book?
Yeah, I took that right from the book, yeah. And it's, and most of the articles are kind of abstruse and kind of, they don't really relate much, but the one in there, it presented this account here. Pretty cool. Now, just by way of passage, there's another pictograph on Spirit Mountain also, and I'm not sure how this one connects with the other one, but she also had an interpretation for this. There's Spirit Mountain there, same Spirit Mountain, right? And what's this other business going on here? There's younger brother as chief, and there's 7 lollipops, 7 people carried by younger chief away from the mountain and across the waters, right? In a vessel.
Oh.
See that? Why 8 people?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that funny, right? And then so it indicates where the waters rose, the waters they crossed, and the Wallapai people there. And following this event, the people were instructed to scatter and dwell over all the land, and you have their own dispersion story of peoples across the earth, including, you know, and they emphasize no white men were there. So they don't like that. Yeah. And there was, you know, abundance of grass and waters and trees and food for drink, and the Navajos and the Mohawks and the Wallapies, this was their dispersion story. Isn't that interesting? Okay, so you've seen 11 evidences why it's reasonable. It's truly reasonable to believe there was a global flood. So you're going to hear more about these kind of diatribes like this. This is a powerful book here, and it's. I think it cannot deal with these evidences. It's picking at the fringes of other kind of arguments. It's pulling at little threads. It's not going after the grand scale things in Grand Canyon.
I'm trying to put doubt.
Yeah.
Just trying to put doubt.
Yeah. So I think flood geology works. I think Nicholas Steno was right. I think we've got all the science behind us, and we've got all the future to look forward to in terms of, we know that this world was judged by a worldwide flood. I think God put evidence in the earth's crust for us to see. I really believe that. And the fact that he acted suddenly in the past, when I look at that great unconformity, I can see how suddenly those waters raked across the surface of this continent, raked it clean. And you know what? That was a sign of God's wrath upon sin in the world. And he's coming again. He's going to judge this world again. And we don't know the day or the hour, but it'll be sudden like it was, like a tsunami was sudden, probably. And think about that. That's why I get excited over this. So thank you for your attention tonight. I appreciate your coming out.
We do have time for questions at the present moment. Get drawing tickets out there flooding going on with the aftermath of those events? I know they were tiny compared to
Yeah,
that, but there still should be some ocean sediments that went onto the land.
right.
Somewhere.
Yeah, I think that, you know, in places like Indonesia and the other parts of the world, you've got a lot of wreckage in the early post-flood period. Not all it dates to the flood.
Right.
There was a lot of things happening in the post-flood period too. For example, California and really most of North America is called the New World. Why is it called the New World? Remember when the European period of exploration was going on? They called North and South America the New World. Why?
They didn't think it existed, I don't
Because
think.
people didn't populate this area like they did in Europe, apparently. I suspect it was because it was too violent. California was a place that was diced and sliced and ripped up in the post-flood period. I think you can make a really good case for it.
Yellowstone.
Yeah. So this is a part of the world that you don't see direct evidence for the flood in places like Southern
Yeah,
California
right back.
because this place has been all diced and sliced and
Tidal
upheaved and everything. It's complex. It's really complex.
There
And other
are
parts of the world are
fossil
more complex. That's the beauty of Grand Canyon. It's simple. You can see the layers there, and you can see the sequence and so on, and it's understandable to people. And that's just a beauty that God put there for us, I think, to point to. Yeah.
Are you gonna show those things on this trip? I mean, what is the trip encompass?
Oh, yeah,
Is it-
it'll be like a full seminar on wheels. So I teach the geology, and another fellow joins me, Jeremy Lyon is his name, and he's a professor of Hebrew. And he breaks down the flood account in kind of fun detail, and also the creation account. And so we talk about that on the way out, the way back. And Dr. John Baumgartner's coming, PhD geophysicist coming along on this one. Yeah, so it's great having him along. And he talks about plate tectonics. Oh, you want to listen to this guy. He's a top level geophysicist. Even in the secular eyes, they respect him.
Yeah, it seems to me that going there with a geologist would be better than going as the run-of-the-mill tourist, you know?
Oh, yeah, you
know,
get
that
a
they
lot
just
more.
see the sights and all that
Right.
stuff, you know?
Yeah, and we talk about the significance of the flood and the evidences we're looking at. And we hike down part of the way in the canyon just to look at some of the, you know, just to begin to walk part of the way down one of the trails, just to take a casual stroll, you know. Yeah, as a group, and we talk about what we're looking at. Yeah, it's a good time.
What's that area, I forget the name of, the area of eastern Washington?
Scablands of Eastern
Scab.
Washington.
Scablands, yeah.
Yeah.
Aren't there a lot of holes in the rock there that they think may have been caused by cavitation
Oh, yeah.
there?
Yeah, that is one of the best episodes in the history of geology, right? The story of the channel scablands. And there's the best, just a great book I found was great, was one called Cataclysms on the Columbia. And it's an account of this geologist named J. Harlan Bretz who explored out there in the 1920s. He found these big boulders laying around in eastern Washington, huge house-sized boulders, rounded things, laying out on this basalt rock where it doesn't belong. He found canyons that don't have rivers in them. All right, he called them coulees. No one ever had a name for the things before. All right, and he discovered other like giant ripple marks on the land surface. And he proposed that there was a big ice age flood that swept across here. Not the Genesis flood. This would have been after, right? When the glaciers were melting, impounding water, the water escaped. Water hundreds of feet deep swept across almost half of the state of Washington to do this kind of scouring work. And he discovered all. He was the detective that put together the whole picture. And he presented it to GSA, Geologist Society of America. And what did they say? They said, At the time, uniformitarianism was reigning strong in America, right? It was the 1920s and 30s and 40s. And he proposed, he says, it looks to me like a big flood swept across here. I'm proposing there was an Ice Age flood that happened, right? And everybody in the GSA, they said, oh, what kind of throwback to the Dark Ages are you next year to talk about Noah's flood? And he got ridiculed. But he kept doing his work steadily over the years, building his case. And it came around to the 1960s or 70s when everyone was persuaded that he was right all along. And the guy was 93 years old, I think, and they dragged him up on the stage at the GSA annual convention and gave him the Penrose Medal, the highest award in geology you can get. You were right all along.
Wow.
And he was a very gracious man. He received it, you know, and he could have said something like, "Thanks a lot," after all the ridicule you guys gave him. You know, he didn't say that, but he could have, you know. And it's just a great chapter in the history of science because it shows how this anti-flood defense was alive and well for many decades in American history.
It also shows consensus, which is what people are talking about today, is garbage, all right?
Yeah,
It's
that's
the
not
scientists doing the work,
right.
revealing the facts, not, oh, most of them believe that, because most of them are generally just going along with the flow,
Right.
no pun intended.
Science has always been a minority movement. The great movements of science were always a minority movement. Yeah.
So after you believed the biblical account and became a creationist, how did your former colleagues that were evolutionists, how did they react to your change?
Yeah, good question. Well, I'll tell you one advisor I was working with. I worked for the oil company in Houston, Texas. I was a geologist with an oil company, and I had an advisor there, and he happened to be the same advisor that when we got laid off because the industry went into the bust cycle, and he became also my advisor when I started into a graduate program at that time with a university, and I was doing graduate research in Houston on oil industry related stuff. And I told him about this terrific thing I found about flood geology, and there's this place in California called Institute for Creation Research, and I told him, I said, you know, I'm really thinking about transferring to this place. He says, can you tell me more about it? Because he was a friendly guy, he was a secular guy, an evolutionist and everything, and but he was looking out for my welfare. He was a nice guy, elder, you know, he was older than me, and I showed him a little handbook for the Institute for Creation Research. And by this time I was doing cartwheels that such a place existed, much less go out there to be a student, you know. And he says, okay, if I borrow this. He looked it over and he talked to me about it afterwards. And he said, Bill, I think you're making a big mistake. That's what he told me. And I respected him for he really felt that way. And I understand that's the way secular people think, you know. But I was really convinced at that time that I was supposed to come out to this graduate school. And I never regretted it. I never have. It's been a real exciting ride. To me, geology underwent revival for me. I became a real lover of the subject like I wasn't before. You know, of the science of it. The science of it. And it's not, you know, I don't believe that you have to look through this lens of the Bible to understand how reasonable God made this earth and how he judged this earth. I think it's plain to see. If you're honest, the problem is most people are not honest. That's what the problem is.
I kind of took it in the chin myself. I just with I'm teaching a 3-year-old class, and I had a helper that was a local professor, And, so I taught the 6-day creation, and I made a big deal about the order of things, how out of order it was, like, God made flowers and,
Oh, yeah.
before he had the sun and
Good.
everything,
And evolution said a different story.
right,
Yeah.
and at the end, we're cleaning up, and he says, well, I suppose you believe in a worldwide flood too. And I said, yes, I do. And I didn't have Genesis 7:20 memorized, where it says it covered all the mountains by the space of 20 feet or whatever it is,
Right.
15 feet.
15 cubits.
Yeah.
And
15
I
cubits
wish
or-
I had had
Yeah.
that verse at the tip of
14
my
cubits,
tongue,
something
you
else.
know.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget that verse because that pretty much, because he believes in a localized flood, like just the area,
Yeah.
just that
That's
Tigris,
okay.
just that where cradle of civilization was, you
Yeah.
know. So,
Yeah, Genesis 7 verse 19 is a
Yeah,
good one.
7:19, is it 7:19? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that you mentioned tonight.
Second
And
reader's good.
that is one really good verse
Sure it is.
because it says all the mountains were covered by that.
Oh, but there's a long
Yeah.
list of arguments why the flood had to be global. You know, why build an ark?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they could have just ran to high ground.
Mhm.
What's the point of an ark? Are you kidding me?
He had, what, 100 years?
It's a
120?
mockery to believe it was a local
120,
flood.
yeah.
Yeah,
He built the thing for 120 years.
yeah.
You think they couldn't have had an migration by then and, get out of there?
Right, a year-long local flood seems to be nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, we just experienced the rains here.
I know.
It comes, it goes, all right, it's done.
Right.
If it's a year long, you got something bigger going on.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. And the promise at the end of the flood that God would ever judge the world with water again. Well, if it was a local flood, He's broken his promise. We've had
Mhm.
plenty of local
Yeah.
floods. Yeah. And why put birds? Birds especially are mobile. They can fly away to high ground. Noah was told to take birds on the ark. Why? It was a local flood?
Oh, I didn't think of that.
That's an
Yeah,
exercise in stupidity is what the whole thing is, a mockery. To take the text of Genesis and say that it was a local flood mocks the word of God. It's, and these are, people that we look up to. I mean, there are a lot of Christians who believe in an old earth.
Yeah, I know.
And if you believe in an old earth, you have to believe in a local flood. The two go together.
Mhm.
A lot of people don't get that. And so, all these big professors at Biola and all these guys, who believe in the Big Bang and millions of years and all this stuff, they must believe in a local flood as well. They have to believe that text means something radically different than the way you read it.
And I know they didn't used to believe that. This has been the trend as Bible colleges become universities. They want to draw in a bigger net,
Exactly. Yeah.
and it's a compromise
Yeah, I
with
think
the
that
Word of
happens.
God.
Well, yeah, you want to be intellectually acceptable with the rest of the academic community,
Yeah.
and so you dilute your faculty down and you
Right.
accept stuff that you wouldn't normally do.
Yeah.
And then the theologians capitulate, and they're not standing strong on it. Well, it could be, we can fit it in here. You got Furtado with, and these guys, and you just,
Right.
get, sorry to be, grow a pair, all right? Come on, stand for what it says. That's what the words mean. Come on.
Yeah.
Don't get pushed around by the scientists.
And they've engineered it today so that you're almost being offensive to ask them, can you explain your position biblically? Because I don't understand how you can reconcile that with what it says in the Word of God. And they pretend to be offended and walk away. That's what these guys do if you ask them questions,
Well, do you ever engage in the presentation of this topic in the form of a debate?
I've had sort of debates, not a formal one, no, but I have, yeah. You're welcome, guys. Yeah, have a good night. Yeah.
Well, Bill used to do this on the radio too. When we worked together at ICR,
Yeah.
we do radio interviews,
Right.
and that's when you get People are coming at you.
Yeah,
Or we get geologists, for instance, through the museum when we were working, you know,
right,
the San Diego State class would come, or the UCSD class,
yeah.
and those were always fun, because those guys knew their cookies, and, you know, they come at you full bore. But the unfortunate thing is, a lot in the Christian community, people like Hugh Ross and some of these others, seem to be some of the biggest opponents of what the Bible says. All right, and it's tragic. Our own people don't stand up for what the Word
Is
says.
that what we call
Theistic evolution,
Yes.
or
They wouldn't call it, they'd be very
Long
offended
age.
if you called them that.
Long age, or,
yeah,
They
no,
say
this one's,
they-
he's a
they're not
theistic
They're
evolution.
not a theist, they're a progressive creationist.
Oh,
progressive.
oh,
Yeah, that's a
So we got more progressives out
relations.
there.
Yeah.
So
Term.
progressive creationist is a theistic evolution turned inside out, that's kind of what it is, yeah.
Mm.
Well, it's very sad because it's so prevalent. One school I know of, even their fourth grade reading curriculum, was the whole theme, was thematically, it was evolution. And it's so prevalent in our high schools and colleges, you know, you just think of your kids.
It's
and
child
your
abuse
kids,
is what it
They
is.
go there and they hear that stuff,
Yeah.
and they teach it as fact.
And now we're paying the price.
Mhm.
Things like God made man and woman. Well, that's, you know,
Yeah.
that's back in that mythological period, and that doesn't matter anymore. All right? Whereas God, no, He made him different for a reason, okay? And that follows through with a creator who's outside of his creation. But no, with evolution, everything is one. The universe is all one. It all came from one place.
It's fluid.
Whereas the Bible suggests different, that there's a creator outside of his creation that made everything. All right, don't get
Yeah. And the secular man, he hates the distinctives that God made
Exactly.
in nature. And one of the major distinctions he made is male and female, right?
Matthew
He
19.
designed it that way. And when man tells us, no, there's really no gender differences and all this kind of business, what is he doing? He's shaking his fist at God, is what it is.
Sure is.
And this is what Romans 1 teaches.
Yep.
This is explicit. This isn't my opinion. This is what the Apostle Paul said. You know?
Exactly.
It's also in Matthew 19:4-6. People just read the Bible straight up, play the ball where it lies.
But this whole business, it really is true with 2 Peter 3. You know,
Yep. Suppressing the truth.
you want to forget about the flood. You want to forget about how God acted suddenly in earth history. Guess what? You're going to be fast asleep when Christ comes again. You're going to be one of those virgins that's, you know, doesn't have her lamp trimmed, you know. And we don't want to be that, you know. This is the great hope. This is where, and I wonder how diminished that hope is among the Christian community compared to what it was in the first century today. I wonder what that,
It is very, we find that he teaches,
yeah,
creation,
yeah.
you know, he's gonna do it at our church, and he teaches prophecy, and people just, you know, they don't wanna believe it. This trend within the church, you know, I don't know, Reformed theology, I'm just seeing my friends all go through this, you know,
Yeah.
and then they don't wanna believe in the rapture, you know, they wanna believe in the sudden coming of the Lord for his own, you know.
Yeah, well, yeah, they still, you know, a lot of them still believe in the sudden coming of Christ, whether there's a rapture or not, that's a whole other thing. But, you know, as long, but I just wonder what the long-term effects have been of teaching old earthism and evolutionism and what that's really done to hammer the Christian's hope of Christ's second coming, because Jesus connected he connected the flood with his second coming. Peter connected those two. The book of Jude does that too. You know, other scriptures do. There's a real connection there, and we ignore that in our